This is what we were trying to do at the end of the previous lecture. I told you that microstrip is a practical variation on the strip line in the sense that we remove the top dielectric. This makes access to the strip easier. And the electromagnetic aspect of that change is that now in the cross section of the line, we have a mixture of air and dielectric. To take care of that analytically, a concept called effective dielectric constant has been brought in. Effective dielectric constant replaces epsilon r for analytical purposes, as simple as that. This is the formula, approximate formula. Epsilon r plus 1, divide the entire thing divided by 2, plus epsilon r minus 1 divided by 2. And then there is a factor which depends on the aspect ratio W divided by H. W is the strip width, H is the thickness of the substrate. As I was telling you last time, the maximum possible value of epsilon r effective is epsilon r, which will occur when W goes to infinity. That means you'll get a parallel plate capacitor. The minimum value is 1, which will happen when even the bottom half is filled with air. In that case, we have uniform cross section. Epsilon r becomes 1. So if you put 1 in equation 1, then if you put epsilon r equal to 1 in equation 1, you'll get epsilon r effective equal to 1. So for practical purposes, the value of epsilon r effective that you should get is always going to be between 1 and epsilon r. If you are getting something other than that, there is a mistake in calculations. Okay. Once this modification, this thing I showed you last time, the field lines in both strip line and microstrip, I'm not going to go over it once again. The behavior of a microstrip can be described in terms of equations similar to those that we were using for strip line. The difference being that wherever we had epsilon r in strip line, now we will have epsilon r effective. Lot of research is there behind all these equations. I'm not going into all that. Phase velocity is speed of light divided by square root of effective dielectric constant. Beta is 2 pi divided by lambda. Lambda is lambda naught divided by square root of epsilon r effective. Lambda naught is the free space wavelength, C divided by F. Characteristic impedance formula, approximate formula is given here for W by H less than 1. And for W by H greater than 1, there is a different formula that we have to use. A lot of empirical corrections have been made to theory in coming up with these formulas. Okay. Attenuation constant formulas are around for both alpha C and alpha D, like we saw in strip line. We will ignore losses for most of the calculations, but be aware that if necessary, losses alpha can be calculated also. Now for design, it is the opposite problem to figure out W required for a given Z0. For that, two different sets of equations are given depending on whether W by H is greater than 2 or less than 2. Now catch 22 here is that you don't know whether W by H is going to be less than 2 or greater than 2 because W is an unknown. So to begin with, which equation to use is an open question. We take a blind shot in practice. We start with one of them, figure out W by H value. If it meets the condition for that equation, we stop. If it doesn't, we go to the other equation. There are local parameters here. For equation for W by H less than by 2, there is a local parameter capital A, which is given by this approximate formula. This A this capital A should not be confused with ABCD parameters. They are different. Similarly, for the other range of W by H, there is a local parameter capital B. In fact, there is another parameter also which I am defining as capital G. Equations are quite complex, nobody can remember them. They have to be made available to you during the exam. Otherwise, you cannot do the design. That's for sure. But important thing is for you to figure out the correct equation to use, apply it correctly. Now, the simplest problem. By the way, the materials that we use for microstrip are identical to what we were using for strip line. So in this case, one particular material has been given to you, Rogers Corporation's 5880 substrate. Epsilon R for it approximately is 2.2. The thickness is 10 mil. Mil means 1 divided by 1000 of an inch. We are talking very small dimensions here. This substrate, we have got it in the lab, I think. Someday you'll see it. It's a low loss substrate for microwave frequencies. Now we want to design a microstrip line. That means we want to figure out W required for a 50 ohm characteristic impedance. Thickness of the substrate H is given as 10 mil. Epsilon R is given as 2.2. Now I told you that we have two possible equations, 13 or 15, to begin with. Either this one or this one. But we don't know which one to use because we don't know W. We take a blind shot. And let's begin with equation 13. If I want to use equation 13, first I need to figure out capital A. Z naught is given as 50 ohm, epsilon R is 2.2. You can put all these values in equation 14. Please check my calculations. I'm always afraid that I may have made a mistake. I was about to make a mistake, but I corrected myself. So capital A turns out to be uh, 1.1591. These are approximate calculations, okay? I take 4-digit accuracy, you may take 3-digit, fine. So capital A turns out to be 1.1591 based on the equation given, equation 14. And from there, I go to equation 13. Yeah, this one. I substitute capital A value here, calculate W by H. Calculator is able to do most of these calculations. I get W divided by H, the aspect ratio, as 3.1256. But look at the validity of the equation, which was for equation 13 was valid for W by H less than 2, but we are getting W by H greater than 2. So this equation's use is not correct. We should actually use the other one. For that, we have to repeat the calculation, but now we need to calculate capital B, capital G, etc. and plug back into equation 15. Our choice was wrong, but anyway, that's life. So we have to go to the second equation. Capital B formula is given here, repeated again. So it turns out to be almost equal to 7.9851. Capital G, this is the formula. It turns out to be 2.0565. We substitute all these values in the formula for W by H, which is equation 15, this one. Let's see what we get for W by H. Hopefully it will meet the condition for the applicability of that equation. We get W by H almost 3.089, which is actually meeting the requirement W by H greater than 2 for equation 15. So we use now the correct equation. Usually a MATLAB program does all this and it also makes the decision which equation to use. But in the exam, that's not possible. You'll have to do it manually. So we have figured out that W by H is 3.089. Sorry, 3.081, my mistake. H is 10 mil. So obviously W will be 30.81 mil, almost. By the way, most of the time after making these calculations, we go to a simulation package, a simulation tool. And there we further refine the performance. These are starting values that we get using these reasonably accurate equations. Now, problem 2 says verify what you got in problem 1. That means you should use analytical equations to make sure Z naught is 50 ohm for your design. The formula for Z naught, depending on W by H value, is different. You can check back in this document later. For W by H greater than 1, this was the formula, where capital F is a local parameter again. So I am repeating all the calculations. In this formula, epsilon r effective also appears. So you have to calculate that also. W by H is 3.08 something. So H by W will be 1 upon that. You substitute all those values. Epsilon r effective turns out to be 1.8712. It is between 1 and epsilon r as expected. Capital F also is calculated later, I think. And plugging in all the values, I indeed find that Z naught is quite close to what I wanted. It is not exactly 50 ohm. Fair enough. This is reality. All equations are accurate to within a few percent anyway. So the value W by W equal to 30.81 mil is indeed going to give you Z naught equal to almost 50. That's correct. Now for the same microstrip that we have designed in problems 1 and 2, let's calculate various performance parameters. Phase velocity will be will be C divided by square root of epsilon r effective. Operating wavelength will be phase velocity divided by frequency of operation, which is 2.4 gigahertz. Phase constant will be, you can either use Vp equal to omega by beta or some other method. We'll see in a minute. And once you get phase constant, you multiply it by the length of the line to get the total phase shift. Simple calculations. Vp is C divided by square root of epsilon r effective. You can put the value of epsilon r effective, 1.87 something. The speed of signal inside the microstrip is less than the speed of light because obviously dielectric material is there. It will slow down the wave. Lambda is, you can do this way, lambda naught, which is C divided by F, which turns out to be for 2.4 gigahertz signal, it turns out to be 0.125 meter. And then you put it in the formula, you get actual lambda of the signal inside the microstrip edge, 0.1069. Beta is 2 pi divided by lambda. That's one way. You can also calculate Vp equal to omega by beta. From there also you can calculate beta. Either way, it should be the same answer. So beta turns out to be 58.79 radian per meter, lot of degrees per meter. Multiply beta by length to get the phase shift. It's a 3 centimeter long line, which is 3 divided by 100 meters. Make sure your units are correct when doing calculations. The phase shift introduced by this line between input and output of between input and output will be almost 101 degrees. Okay. Next problem is an interesting variation. I had told you in the past that short-circuited and open-circuited lossless lines can be used for simulating or realizing inductors and capacitors. That is being done now using microstrip in this problem. Using the microstrip in problems 1, 2, and 3 with a short-circuited load, calculate the line length required so that a pure 2.8 picofarad capacitor is realized at the input of the line. Neglect losses. Okay. Losses, by the way, generally are taken care of when you do simulation. Simulation tools are much more sophisticated in handling losses. But if you want approximate idea, our equations are also there. Assume frequency equal to 2.4 gigahertz. So I'm repeating the theory once again. If it is a short-circuited line, the input impedance, I'm calling it ZIN SC, will be given by this formula with ZL equal to 0. So that gives you JZ0 tan beta L. And because we are talking as short circuit case, I'm calling it LSC. Okay. So ZIN SC has to be this formula. Lambda naught is very easy to figure out. For 2.4 gigahertz, we have already figured it out previously. It's 0.125 meter. Lambda is lambda naught divided by square root of epsilon r effective, which also is fairly straightforward. We take epsilon r effective value from the previous problems. We know this number for this microstrip. So lambda turns out to be 9.138. Important thing is to figure out beta. Beta is 2 pi by lambda. It turns out to be whatever value I'm showing you, 0.68759 radian per centimeter. Now I'm talking radian per centimeter. Be careful about the unit of length. So you want that this JZ0 tan beta LSC should look like a capacitor of 2.8 picofarad value. That means the impedance should look like minus JXC, where XC is 1 upon 2 pi FC. F is given, C is given. ZIN SC is supposed to be a pure capacitor's impedance. That is what we want. So it's minus J upon 2 pi FC. I plugged in the values. The required capacitance is 2.8 picofarad. So I took 10 to the power 12 in the numerator. Frequency is 2.4 gigahertz. I'm putting all that. Hopefully there is no mistake in my calculation. So the required impedance at the input is minus J 23.680. That is what will give you the capacitance that you need at 2.4 gigahertz. I equate this value to JZ0 tan beta LSC. Now it's a matter of solving this problem and calculate LSC, the length required. So J cancels out, obviously, but minus remains on the left side. So tan beta LSC is minus 23.68 divided by 50, which is almost minus 0.4736, I think. Double check all this. So you take tan inverse of that, the radian value for beta LSC turns out to be minus 0.4423. Double check my calculations, please. So once I know beta LSC, LSC is 1 upon beta, and beta is 2 pi divided by lambda. It is known to you already. Unfortunately, there is a minus sign here. So you are getting negative length. Why is it happening? Because you have chosen the fundamental solution to tan beta LSC equal to minus something. The next higher solution will be pi plus this value. when you get a negative value, you go for the next higher solution. So basically you add pi to this minus answer. Not for LSC, by the way. You add pi to minus 0.4423 to get beta LSC equal to a positive value. It becomes 2.6993. Now you do the calculation for LSC. 3.9257. If you don't want to do that, a straightforward method is whenever you get a minus length, simply add lambda by 2 to it. Because after every lambda by 2, things repeat themselves. That can work directly. You know lambda already, it is 9.138 centimeter. Half of that should be added to the minus value to get the positive value. I think you'll get the same answer if you use that technique. So converting negative length answers to positive means adding lambda by 2. That's it. It's a generic rule in microwave transmission lines. So the length required is actually 3.9257 centimeters approximately. Now suppose we want to repeat the same problem with open circuit. The formula now will have to be rederived. In the formula for input impedance, I put ZL as tending to infinity. For that, I have to first divide numerator and denominator by ZL before I put the limit. So in the numerator, I get 1 plus J Z0 tan beta. By the way, I'm calling the length as LOC now, and input impedance also as Z in OC because we are talking open circuits. So in the numerator, I get 1 plus J something, and when you put ZL going to infinity, that term disappears. Z0 by ZL goes to 0 when ZL goes to infinity. In the denominator, I get Z0 divided by ZL, which goes to 0, plus J tan beta LOC. So the formula in this case for input impedance is minus J Z0 cot beta LOC. We have done it in the past, but I'm repeating it. The impedance required is the same as in the previous problem, minus J 23.68 ohm. So let's equate the two. And now you get cot beta LOC equal to plus 0.4736. Taking cot inverse on a calculator is not available directly. So I looked up trigonometric formulas and I found this formula. Hopefully I'm not wrong. Cot inverse x plus tan inverse x is always pi by 2. If that is true, let's find tan inverse of that and then subtract that result from pi by 2 to get cot inverse. Hopefully mistake. So cot inverse of 0.4736 turns out to be 1.1284 something radians, which is in degrees also it is 64 point something. LOC is now it's not a negative answer, so we don't have to worry about adding lambda by 2 at all. You are getting a positive length, which is good. Simply divide this 1.1284 something, which I'm approximating as 1.1285, divided by beta value, which you already know. So the required LOC, required length in open circuited case is 1.641 something centimeters. Okay. Now we can repeat these problems for realizing inductors also. For instance, repeat problem 4 for realizing a 3.6 nanohenry inductor at the input of the line. So on the right hand side, you get the same thing as you got in problem 4. But on the left side, now you'll have plus J 2 pi FL. F is 2.4 gigahertz. L is 3.6 into 10 to the power minus 9 Henry. Put it all together. the input impedance requirement now is plus J 54.29 ohm. So equate the two and solve the resulting equation. Again, assuming there is no mistake in the calculation, this is the answer. In this case, we are getting positive answer, so no need to add lambda by 2, no need to go to the next higher solution. You can repeat this for problem 5 also, where instead of capacitor, we are realizing an inductor. Do it yourself. I'm sure you'll be able to handle it. One more interesting problem, which I want you to tackle, and I'm giving you the answer. How to design a 75 ohm microstrip line using a 60 mil thick FR4 substrate. You use the equations that I have given you in the beginning of the document. Since you don't know which formula to use for W by H, you start with one of them blindly and then look at the result. If result meets the condition under which that formula should be applied, then you do not use the other formula. If the result does not meet the condition for that formula, then you go to the other formula. You'll have to do it yourself. And once you get W by H correctly figured out, simply multiply W by H by 60 to get W. I have not here repeated the value of epsilon R for FR4, but it is given previously. It is 4.37. It is given previously in some other document. You can look it up on the net also anytime. FR4 dielectric constant is approximately 4.4 or 4.37. These things vary anyway with temperature and so many other things. We take a nominal value to move forward. The expected answer is 54 mil. And you can calculate epsilon R effective also for your design, because that will help you in calculating the various performance parameters if necessary. Please do this yourself. There is a large number of online tools available for carrying out these calculations. You plug in your required Z0, you plug in the value of H, and you plug in the value of epsilon R, it automatically tells you W required. So you can use those tools to double check your answers. There's one gentleman, Pasternak, Pasterneck. You can look up his design tools on the net. Look up microstrip Pasternak. You will see his tool, which is the one I trust the most to double check my answers. There's a lot more than that, of course. So these things are real life examples of how to calculate the required widths for microstrip. And in the previous lecture, we had spoken about strip line doing the same thing as we are doing today for microstrip. Okay. I've avoided electromagnetics for both of these lines. Instead, I gave you what is required in industry right from day one if you go in this direction. Okay. Now, I think the last topic before midterm is S parameters. I had briefly spoken about S parameters in the past, but I did not go into detail for a good reason. You have seen that circuit parameters are either Z parameters or Y parameters or ABCD parameters. And unfortunately, all of them require open circuits and short circuits for measurement purposes. As frequencies go higher and higher, open circuits and short circuits are not necessarily that ideal. Open circuits show leakage and radiation of energy, so they are no more perfectly open. Short circuits start having a lot of undesirable effects, capacitance, resistance, etc. So you cannot claim that it's a perfect short circuit. A more reliable technique for defining circuit parameters, and this applies to transmission lines also. Transmission line, after all, is a two-port network. A more reliable method, which industry prefers for characterizing two-port networks at high frequencies. And when I say high, I'm almost telling you that once you move beyond 1 or 2 megahertz, Z parameters, Y parameters, ABCD parameters all start having unrealistic, uh, what should I say, unrealistic implications. You don't capture reality. So after 1 or 2 megahertz, it is highly recommended that you try using S parameters. Of course, theory for S parameter can be related back to ABCD parameters very easily. So that is the good news. Whatever we did for ABCD parameters can be extended to S parameters very easily. So theoretically, it's not a big issue. But practically speaking, this improves the accuracy of everything in modeling. So S parameters, how are they defined? They, instead of having to choose independent variables as voltage or current, they instead focus on choosing the, we have seen in transmission lines that a realistic picture is that if an input voltage is being sent to a network or to a transmission line, some of it will be reflected back. There is something called an incident signal and something called a reflected signal. This is how high frequencies work. So suppose I take a two-port network and I say that the incident voltage at port 1 is V1 plus and reflected voltage is V1 minus. And similarly at port 2, the incident voltage is V2 plus and reflected voltage is V2 minus. Ports are more or less like transmission lines. They have reflections and incident field both. Similarly for currents, the incident current, let me define as I1 plus at the input port and reflected current at the input port as I1 minus. And at the output port, incident current is I2 plus, reflected current is I2 minus. These are nomenclatures that we need to move forward in defining S parameters. Okay. S parameters essentially connect reflected voltages with the incident voltages rather than connecting voltages with currents, etc., etc. They don't talk about total voltage. They talk about reflected component and the incident component. There are obviously, I'm talking about two ports here. So S parameters are only 4 and they are written in this symbolic matrix form. S11, S12, S21, S22. They are unitless quantities, by the way. This is how we define them. Both the reflected voltages at the two ports are taken together as a column matrix on the left-hand side, and both the incident voltages are taken as a column matrix on the right side. And whatever is required in between is called the S matrix of the network. In terms of equations, you can write them as shown here in equations 4 and 5. Now the 4 definitions S11, S12, S21, S22 are fairly obvious. S11 will be V1 minus divided by V1 plus when V2 plus goes to 0. That means there is no incident voltage on port 2. In practice, we realize that condition by terminating the output port in a matched load so that nothing can get in. We don't need open circuits and short circuits here. We need a matched load. That is the advantage of using S parameters. S12 similarly is V1 minus divided by V2 plus when the input port is matched. S21 is V2 minus divided by V1 plus when output port is matched. And S22, of course, is V2 minus upon V2 plus when input port is matched. There are two of these 4 parameters which are local, S11 and S22. S11 purely depends on the behavior of the input port. S22 purely depends on the output port. The other two are transfer parameters. So these are the four definitions. Okay. Now, how do you apply all this to some standard problems? One simple case I could think about was a transmission line. Yeah, anyway, before that, I'm also stating what I told you. Note that condition V1 plus equal to 0, that means that means incident signal is 0 for input port. It can be achieved accurately even at high frequencies by terminating the port 1 or input port into a matched load. And similarly, V2 plus equal to 0 can be achieved by terminating the output port in a matched load. So all these four definitions can be accurately applied in real life. Now let's tackle this in theory at least for a lossy transmission line. Lossless transmission line is a special case of it anyway. It becomes a little tricky if you want to derive S parameters because it's a little confusing. You're talking incident voltage and reflected voltage. You have to be mentally very clear in interpreting things. In this problem, it's not that difficult. But if you have a complicated circuit, it is always a pain to try to derive S parameters ab initio. If you have a complicated system, we generally just take it to the lab and test it out and take the experimental data and put it in the simulation to make things more realistic. Industry wants things to be accurate. Even if it seems like we are doing a dumb-headed approach, so be it. The cost of failing in designing something correctly is too large. Okay, so that factor has to be kept in mind. Simulations are made more realistic nowadays by putting experimental data in the simulation itself to the extent possible. Anyway, all that will be clear to you as you progress in your career more and more. So, how do we handle this problem? Purely on paper. I have a lossy transmission line. These are the two well-known equations. Let's apply the four definitions systematically. S11, what does it say? It says you terminate the output port in a matched load and take the ratio of reflected voltage and incident voltage at the input. Okay, let's try that. And I'm assuming that the characteristic impedance of the line is same as the port impedance. So I'll be terminating the line with Z0 in this case at least. First of all, before we do that, let's write down the four quantities V1, I1, V2, I2 based on these equations. We have done that in the past. Let's do it again. For getting V1, I simply put small z equal to 0. So I get V1 equal to V plus V minus. For getting I1, I again use equation 2, but I put small z equal to 0. So I get 1 upon Z0 multiplied by V plus minus V minus. V2 is obtained by putting small z equal to L, which is the length of the line. And I2 similarly by using equation 2 with small z equal to small l. So these are the four equations for input and output voltages and currents for a lossy transmission line. Now, for S11, I want to terminate port 2 in Z0. That means I'm putting an extra condition, V2 equal to I2 Z0. For the sake of for the sake of defining these equations in transmission lines, we had assumed I2 to be coming out. So if you keep that in mind, V2 equal to I2 Z0 is fine. Okay. Now, once that condition has been imposed, I take V2 and I2 values from 5 and 6, from equations 5 and 6, and put them here. V2 is given by equation 5. I2 is given by equation 6. I equate the result and I get a very interesting answer. V minus is 0. This is exactly what I was telling you, that terminating it into Z0 impedance means the reflection is gone. So in this particular case, V minus is 0 because of the way we are terminating the transmission line. Once that is known, S11 is supposed to be V1 minus upon V1 plus, and V1 minus, you can look at it. What is the reflected component of V1? It is the second part on the right hand side of equation 3. So reflected component is V minus actually in this case. So S11 turns out to be 0. Interesting result. I have similarly tried to work out S12. Other two would be equal. S22 will also work out to be 0, and S21 will also work out to be exactly what S12 is. This is a symmetric situation. So let's see how you handle S12. For S12, you have to terminate port 1 with Z0. Port 1 had current going in, while Ohm's law says V1 equal to I Z0 with current with the V1 equal to I1 Z0 with current going up. So keeping that in mind, I put the requirement now as V1 equal to minus Z0 I. And once I do that, I again substitute the values of V1 and I1 from equations 3 and 4. And this time around, I get V plus equal to 0. You can double check once you get the document. And S12, which is V1 minus upon V2 plus, that is the way it is defined, as long as you are doing the correct termination. V1 minus, that is reflected component of the input voltage divided by incident component of the output of the port 2 voltage. Reflected component of the input voltage is V minus, we have seen that already. Incident component of the V2 voltage, everything in S parameter definition is assumed to be going in. This is a catch here. For the, let's go to the equation for V2. V2 is supposed to be going in. That's the way S parameters are defined. So the incident component is the second term on the right hand side of phi. Think about it. If you're not sure, we can discuss later. So if you do that, you get this. S12 turns out to be e to the power minus gamma I. And the other two are identical. S21 is same as S12. You can double check this. And S22 is same as S1. So the final result for the S matrix of a lossy transmission line is this. I know S parameter derivations can be a little confusing. I fully understand that. And I'll give you a solution to that problem. For a lossless case, it is obvious that gamma would be replaced by J beta, right? So second problem is very similar, very easy to figure out. Same result, but replace gamma by J beta. Now, we know that derivations are, this problem I'll take later on, or maybe I will even ignore it. I want you to give a practical solution to avoiding derivations for S parameters. This is a table that contains all the formulas for converting one kind of circuit parameters to another. I would prefer you to have access to this table during the exam, honestly. Let's see how it goes. So if you want to avoid derivations for S parameters, one method is figure out ABCD parameters and then use these formulas. This is an indirect way which some people prefer rather than, especially if the network is quite complicated. For a simple thing like transmission line, it was not bad. We could derive S11, S12, S21, S22 directly from basic definitions. But alternate method, which a lot of simulation tools actually depend on, is that rather than directly calculating S parameters, they first calculate ABCD parameters and then use these conversion formulas. I'm not giving you derivations for these conversion formulas. If time permits, I could have given them, but it's not necessary. People have done all these derivations. This table is a very powerful table for converting circuit parameters from one kind to another. Many of these formulas were already done by us. For instance, if you want to convert Z parameters into Y, these are the formulas, which I think we have gone through already. If you want to convert Y parameters into Z parameters, then also formulas are here. We have done that also in previous documents. Some of them I showed, some of them I wanted you to prove. So this table is an essential description of all the formulas that one should keep handy all the time when designing things. You can easily convert one kind of parameters to another. Okay. So that is about S parameters. Next time I'll probably talk a little more about S parameters. There is a second variety of S parameters also, which I'll take up next time.